Moonchild. I am a psychic, I am a medium, and I am also a Reiki master. I hope you all are having a beautiful weekend. There were a couple things I wanted to discuss today. As I am sure you all know, this channel is dedicated not only to psychic vlogs, but they are also dedicated to teaching and occasionally doing readings professionally on my channel. But right now I am really more focused and dedicated on the teaching aspect. That's something that's very important to me, is to spread information and awareness. One of the things I wanted to talk about today was soul fragment retrieval work and shamanic work. Now, shamanism is really a term that was coined by the trade. It is not necessarily accurate to describe all people who do earth work as shamans. A lot of the different cultures that connect to shamanic type practices actually don't use that word. There's not a word in their language that translates to shaman, so some cultures may actually get offended by the use of that terminology. And oftentimes a true shaman, or somebody that's coming from a shamanic line, which is an earth-based practice, working with spirits that are connected to the earth specifically, or ancestral work, they require a lineage to be considered formally a shaman. A lot of people in America that have connected to a lineage tend to really hail their roots or their teachings from Central America, South America, or Latin America, such as Ecuador, Peru, Chile, and things of that nature. I've known several people that have connected to shaman or shamanic type practices from those areas. Another common form of shamanism connects to indigenous work. Native American, again, it's not right to necessarily call somebody who's connected to Native American work a shaman. Native American practices are very secular to Native American culture, and it's really ethically and morally not necessarily fair to claim Native American work if you do not have that bloodline. It can be considered cultural appropriation, and it's not necessarily fair to say somebody works with Native American practices if they haven't been connected to that culture, raised in that culture, introduced to that culture, or accepted into that culture. It's not just religious work, it is bloodline, it is, again, ancestral, it is history, it is belief, it is their practice. So a lot of these peoples that connect to these cultures really hold their work sacred, and it takes years and years and years to connect to that work. So when you're saying you were born a shaman, which a lot of people have said they're born a shaman, that's not necessarily the correct term, all right? I myself do things that can be considered shamanic in nature. I refuse to call myself a shaman. First of all, I've not been introduced into those practices, into those cultures. It was something that just naturally developed for me as a natural part of my gift. I do have certain bloodlines, but I was not raised amongst those practices and amongst those peoples. So for me to claim that title, I feel would be highly inappropriate and truly unfair to the people that have walked those paths, because it is a path, and a dedicated path at that. So before you start going around saying you're a shaman, make sure you truly understand what that means. All right, not everyone I feel has a right to use that term. Now, you can work with your ancestors without being a shaman. Ancestral work is a whole other video. We'll get into that another time. I'll talk about ancestral work at another point. And you can work with earth-based spirits without being a shaman as well. Those are things you absolutely can do. But again, I digress. It's really important you understand the difference between the culture, the practice, and certain practices that can be considered shamanic in nature, such as soul journeying, vision quests, things like that. Ayahuasca, that's a very, very popular subject matter nowadays, is ayahuasca, doing ayahuasca ceremonies. The reason why I'm bringing up soul fragment retrieval work in conjunction with shamanism is soul fragment retrieval work is considered soul journeying. It is considered shamanic in nature. Now, I do soul fragment retrieval work. It is something that you can do on your own, but it's best that you are very well educated in that. That will also fall in line with things like Kundalini. I don't believe you should try to do Kundalini work, soul fragment retrieval work, ascension work without being well educated about those practices and without knowing what you're doing or being guided by someone who knows what they're doing. I have heard so many stories of people who had done ayahuasca and it was led inappropriately and they had a bad experience and I have not done ayahuasca myself, please understand that. I don't feel that that's right for me. I don't feel like that's going to be something that I put as part of my path, and I may change my mind later. I may not, but at this state in my journey, I don't feel that that's something I connect with. And that's okay. Everyone, again, does things differently. But when I'm saying when you're doing something like ayahuasca, or you're doing something with somebody who claims to be a shaman, make sure you verify their background. Make sure that they had the training, that they know what they're doing. This is one of those things where certification is important, lineage is important, because things can go wrong. And that's not true with all things. I don't believe you need to have a certification to be a psychic medium. I don't believe you need a certification to do a reading. I don't believe you need to do certification to do certain types of energy work, but the teaching is helpful. And to have been taught will always be helpful. Knowledge will always be helpful. It will always help you on your journey to know things and to have the formal knowledge. So I will always be an advocate of education in psychic work, mediumship work, and in healing practices. I feel that the knowledge can only aid you in being better at what you're doing. Now that I've kind of clarified shamanism a little bit more, let's explore soul fragment retrieval work and what that is as an energy healing practice. Soul fragment retrieval work as an energy practice. I actually had a session done today with one of my students. I do let my students practice on me or practice on each other when I do a Reiki class. And in this Reiki class today, I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience. I have had a shamanic healing from somebody who was trained in a line that came from Ecuador and had spent many years going back and forth to Ecuador to receive their training. They were very good at what they do, and I hold that person in great esteem. This young lady that is doing this work, the soul fragment retrieval work, was not a dedicated shaman. And shaman was not a dedicated shaman, had not been formally trained, had been dabbling in these different areas. I'm a dabbler myself. I dabble in different areas and different healing practices, and I've kind of created a mishmash of different healing practices that work for me and work for what I try to do. And again, some of that is including Akashic record work, shamanic work, things like that, cellular healing, DNA healing. You get my drift. She was a lot like that too, and I trusted her to be able to do her practice on me because I could tell she'd done the studying, she had done the work, she had the knowledge, she's been a very, very dedicated student to this path and this energy work for a while now, going on 2-3 years now. But she really, 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 really focused on her studies, so I knew she knew what she was doing. And I was only there to try to help fine tune and guide her through her journey and add to her knowledge base and tell her more. And to also see where she was at in her practices. So when we're doing this Reiki class together, and we're at the point where it's time to start practicing the session to see where she's developed to, I've had a problem with soul fragments for years and years and years, and that's one of the things that began me on my path. And I could see the fragments of myself in visions and in dreams, and I knew that I needed to bring them all back together. Now, what is a soul fragment? I think that's a good place to start. When a soul experiences a trauma, experiences a great grief or great loss, or something that even was a past life trauma, the soul can break apart, where that piece of the soul's experience went through such a traumatic event that it broke off the main part in order to protect itself from what had occurred. What happens is that that piece of the soul stays stuck in a repeat of that emotion. That emotion is stuck. That emotion is not going anywhere. Okay, that is an emotion. It's a trauma. It's an experience that the soul is trying to process, doesn't know how to process. So when somebody says they feel broken, or they feel like they've broken apart, that's actually a soul fragmentation. And when you're trying to retrieve those pieces and put them back together, it's an intense experience. Soul fragment retrieval work I wanted to really impart is not for the faint of heart. It's not only something that as a practitioner has to be done very gently, very easily. The person you're doing the soul fragment retrieval work for has got to have done a lot of work on that. They have to have done the therapy, they have to have done the emotional processing. And sometimes when you do the therapy and the soul processing and the emotional processing and the mental processing and the grieving process and forgiveness and acceptance, and you do all that work, sometimes that's still stuck and it still isn't going anywhere. And I have worked and worked and worked and worked with those emotions and gone to healings and therapy and this and that and done all these different things to try to come to a place of wellness. So when she's doing this soul fragment retrieval work, I know I've done the work. What is holding on? Why is it still here? And it's guilt. It's self-forgiveness. Forgiveness of the self is the last final step, but I knew I had done all this different work, so let me explain my experience to you firsthand. First, soul fragment retrieval work can be physically painful, and that sounds exaggerated. What it's called is an energetic emotional purge, which you can have a very physical experience. Now, I am a physical empath, please understand that. That plays a huge part in my sensory experience of a physical and emotional healing, especially in soul fragment retrieval work. I've had other healings where I just felt warm and light and fuzzy, but that's not usually my experience. Usually my experience is very hands-on, very, very intense, and this was definitely intense. I felt pressure, aches in my body. I was coughing, I was spitting up, I was throwing up. It felt like pieces of glass were in my mouth. I know that sounds insane. Again, if you've never had energy work done, don't start with soul fragment retrieval work, please. Please start with a standard Reiki session, start with integrated energy therapy, start with Qigong, start with anything else to get a true experience. Why would someone want to go through that? Because they've done everything they know how to do to heal. They have gone through everything they know how to do to heal, and they just want to be done. They want to let it go. They want to move on with their life. They're done being stuck. They're done. And they're so, so done that they're just ready to just get it out. And that's what soul fragment retrieval work is. It's either get it out or put it back together, or both. So I'm feeling this. I'm feeling burning, pain, nausea, sweating, all of it. I mean, it's can be a very graphic experience. It can induce flashbacks. It can induce this. It can induce that. That's not always the case in point when it comes to soul fragment retrieval work, and not everyone experiences it that way. But I've come to understand that that's the way that I'm going to experience it. Unfortunately, it's something that I have to embrace as being an empath, a physical empath with my level of sensitivity, and I have to just go ahead and go, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. If anyone's ever had a cleansing detox diet, it's probably not pretty. What happens? Your body's flushing. What does flushing mean? You know what that means. It's not pretty. Your body purges all of the gunk that's in your body. And when you're doing soul fragment retrieval work, you're purging all the emotional gunk. So it's good for when you just don't know where else to go, what to do. You've done all the work you can think to do, but you're just stuck. That's when it's appropriate. It's not appropriate for a first place to start, and it's not appropriate for someone who's just starting off not only as a client but as a practitioner. You don't go there. You don't start trying to delve into soul fragment retrieval work when you're brand new at energy work. You just don't do that. That's too intense, and you can hurt someone emotionally, physically, hurt someone with that energy work. And that's a side of energy work people don't talk about, but I think it's important, again, to discuss, because that knowledge should be put out there. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. Period. Again, Kundalini awakening, don't do it. Ascension work, don't do it. Soul fragment retrieval work, don't do it. Do your research, do your reading, learn about it. When you're pulling all those pieces back in together, it can bring up old emotions you thought you were done with, that you weren't sure about, and this also covers past life regressions too. Sometimes it sounds fun for the experience, but a lot of people don't realize how intense it can be. It can be very visceral, very intense, and it's not for the faint of heart, and you have to be committed to the work to have the work done. So before you start doing soul fragment retrieval work, either as a practitioner or as a person who is just delving into soul healing and getting energy work done because you're trying to find a path to wellness, start elsewhere first. Then move to that stuff. Then move to soul contracts, move to soul fragment retrieval work, move to all those things. Do not force a healing. Do not force something to happen. Take it easy first. Take the easy road first, then up the ante. The reason why I say that is I tried to force a healing for myself. I actually created a setback in my healing process from trying to do too much, too soon, too hard for things I were not ready to face yet. And it actually damaged me emotionally and set me back several years in my healing process. And I had to start from square one. And if I had known that, I would have just taken my time, but I just wanted to be done. I wanted to be done. I wanted to be over it. I was so sick of it. I was so sick of feeling that way and experiencing those things. And you know what? The best medicine really truly is patience, time and be gentle with yourself is the best medicine you could possibly ask for when you're going through the ringer. Okay? Take your time. Be patient with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Understand yourself, and that is the most healing thing you can possibly do for you. So if you're interested in shamanic work or soul fragment retrieval work, consider those things first. If you want to know about shamanism, again, understand it's a dedicated path. People are not born shamans, and it's not fair to coin a term that belongs to a culture without putting forward the energy to be part of that culture or understand its origins. All right? Be fair to the cultures that align themselves with those beliefs and practices that are sacred to them and have been for centuries. If you're interested in soul fragment retrieval work, again, look more into Akashic record work, look more into other avenues, soul contracts, soul agreements, and karmic transmutation. That's going to be where you want to look first and foremost. And again, just look at general Reiki practices. Look at general Reiki, look at Qigong, look at meditation practices, look at positive affirmation work, look at yoga, look at other things first that can help encourage your wellness. And if you feel like it's just not enough, then start looking elsewhere. And again, make sure you're taking all your avenues. Make sure you're going to therapy if you need it, if it's required. Make sure you're doing those things because that's going to be quintessential in your healing work for yourself as you're moving forward in your path. All right. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. I hope you learned a little bit today about soul fragment retrieval work and shamanism, what it is, what it does. And though I've said so much about soul fragment retrieval work not being for the faint of heart, you know what? It's also not inappropriate. I feel like it is an important part of work. I think it's important that we do this, and that we have to remember in any energy work or any healing practices that you take, you have to be a part of the process. It's never going to be an instant fix. You also have to do the work too. So keep that in mind whenever you're going for an energy healing, or you're looking to do the work. None of this, there's no such thing as a fast forward button on your healing. Take your time, be patient, take all your avenues, and do your research. Alright, guys? Much love to you all. I hope you get some sleep. Take care of yourselves, and have a blessed night. Namaste.